We all agree that the Texans' young foundation is good, but how good? How good is the Texans' young foundation relative to the rest of the NFL? Pro Football Focus had a list of top 25 players under the age of 25 entering the NFL season. You want to guess how many Houston Texans made the top 25 of the 25 that are under 25?
How old's Nico?
I think he's older than 25.
Is he?
Entering the season, I think he's going to be 26.
Okay. So 3.
No, he'll be 25 entering the year.
4, 5.
3, not quite 5. 3, which Nico could
was
probably
Nico
be on this
considered?
list.
That's what I was saying.
Nico's not on the list. Stroud is on here. He should be because he's going to be under 25 entering the year. So
The no-brainers are C.J. Will and
no, he's
Stingley.
already turned 25.
Okay, so there you go. So
But that's 25 entering the year. He would be eligible for this list.
Should be.
Well, it says under 25.
I mean,
Maybe he's not.
to be technical, it does say under 25.
It says under 25.
The 3 no-brainers are C.J. Will and Stingley.
Those are the 3.
Yeah.
Those are the 3. And I kind of disagree with where they are. Like, C.J. Stroud is 7th. And Stroud is behind Penei Sewell, tackle for Detroit.
Right.
Which, okay, kind of tough to differentiate between quarterback and tackle. Number 2, Sauce Gardner. Number 3 is Trevor Lawrence. I'm not taking Trevor Lawrence.
absurd.
Now,
No
this is
way.
I'm pretty sure that they use Pro Football Focus grades because they're Pro Football Focus. But then they had Jamar Chase 4, which Jamar Chase, so now that tells me, you had Jamar Chase behind Trevor Lawrence. But this is going off Pro Football Focus grades, and Pro Football Focus grades love Trevor Lawrence. Kyle Hamilton's 5, Aiden Hutchinson 6, and then C.J. Stroud 7. Stingley checks in at 23, and Will Anderson checks in at 14. But, I mean, where they're ranked based on Pro Football Focus grades, who cares? Like, why get caught up in the mud on who's 7th and who's 6th, et cetera, especially when you're using Pro Football Focus grades, which how much do you put stock into Pro Football Focus grades? And if you don't put a whole lot of stock in Pro Football Focus grades, who cares if where Stroud is at 7th and then Lawrence is 3rd? But to me, this does tell about a young foundation that is amongst the best in the NFL. The Houston Texans, placing 3, are one of only 2 teams in the entire NFL that have 3 players on this list or more. The other team that has more than the Texans are the Lions. They have 5. Lions have 5, Texans have 3, and then 3 other teams have multiples. The Jets have 2, the Ravens have 2, and the Falcons have 2. So what this tells me is that the Houston Texans have one of the best young cores, one of the best young nucleuses, one of the youngest, best foundations in the entire NFL.
So I'm thinking about this from the perspective of the Lions. That would mean Gibbs, Laporta, Sewell.
Those are 3.
And then I'm missing like
I don't know if Amon-Ra's under 25.
It's like the Nico
He is.
situation,
He
right?
is under 25.
Okay, so
Okay.
He's on the
4.
list.
Okay. Yeah, I think
He will turn 25
And then
during
Aiden
the season.
Hutchinson's the other one.
there you go. Okay. Yeah, no, look, I think that maybe the league, the rest of the league and the national media are figuring out what we've seen for a while now, which is maybe like in the case of Stingley, because of injury, it took a little bit to develop where Sauce jumped out of the gates real quick. But I think that it's a real discussion now when you compare the two of the fact that Stingley has held his own. If he has another good year, I think he played better than Sauce last year. I think that you've got guys that the foundational pieces you build around on both sides of the football that we weren't seeing a couple years ago, and we were hoping with that Stingley was the first guy. Now you've got the most important position in the entire field in CJ, and you've got Will Anderson Jr., who's been dominant in his first year, or he looks like he can be dominant. And Stingley's going to continue to get better. The 4th one to me would have been Nico. The 5th one to me could have been Christian Harris.
Yeah, Harris, I probably don't have an objection to Harris not making. And again, this is all defined. Like, this is defined by the Pro Football Focus grades that were assigned by Pro Football Focus, and they were graded by Pro Football Focus. So you have to go based on what their numbers are. So, like, we could argue that we would have Harris in our top 25. Nico Collins is a few months shy. Like, I would have Nico Collins on this list if he was a few months earlier or younger. Like, Chris Olave's on this list. I have Nico ahead of Olave, at least in terms of production next year. Olave might be a better football player than Nico. I don't think Olave is going to have a better year than Nico, mainly because of who's throwing them the ball and how good their offense is supposed to be. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I have no problem with St. Brown being ahead of Nico. Garrett Wilson ahead of Nico, I don't really have a problem there. But to me, what this defines more than anything, because we talk, well, the Texans got a really good young core. The Texans have, a promising future. Okay, well, how good? And how can you define that? Well, this is about as good as you can find in terms of defining a young nucleus around the NFL. I mean, 2 years ago, before you had Anderson, before you had Stroud, we were looking at this list. We were looking at this list last year. Do you know how many Houston Texans were on this list? Not a single one. There wasn't a single Houston Texan that was top 25 under 25, which I do think is a good bar to define how good your young nucleus is. And now you have 3 of 25. You're only one of 2 teams in the NFL that can say that. It does define that you're going forward, that you have a promising future. And then we could even argue, well, if Nico Collins was 3 months younger, he'd be on here. If Christian Harris could very well be on the cusp of this as well. So they have 3 in the top 25. They would have 4 if Nico was 2 months younger, and they might have 5 if you go top 30, top 35. So what this tells you more than anything is that the future is bright for the Houston Texans.
No question. And you think about, too, not only just hoping a couple of years ago that Stingley was going to get healthy enough to maybe you could have 1. But the fact that then you've got the 2 guys that had 1 year in Petrie and Pierce, when you were like, oh, wait a minute, if they have another year, you're hoping that they could get consideration. Now you know. I mean, you know quarterback, you know defensive end, you know corner, you know wide receiver, you know these guys, and potentially a linebacker, where you go, now you know that you not only have those guys, but you have the ability to maybe add some guys to that list too. Maybe it's in this draft class you just added, but regardless, that's foundational to build around to make a consistently quality team.
You know how the Texans could have 4?
Tell me.
If they didn't make the Will Anderson trade.
There you go.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Laporta have entered the conversation.
I'm kidding.